For the third day straight, Egyptians took to the streets to protest against poor living standards and the repressive regime of President Hosni Mubarak. While Thursday's protests were largely described as peaceful, there were still clashes. In the northern Sinai, a 17-year-old man was shot and later died, bringing the death toll since Tuesday to at least 7. And around 1,000 people are also reported to have been arrested. Among them, at least 20 members of the banned opposition group, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is not believed to be organising these demonstrations, but they have said they'll take part in the rallies that are expected to begin here within the next few hours. One of the country's highest-profile dissidents, the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency and Nobel Peace Laureate Mohammed al-Baradei, flew into Cairo overnight. Mr al-Baradei has flagged his intention to run against Hosni Mubarak in September in presidential elections. And on his return to Egypt, he also signalled he would take part in further protests.
I have said a number of times, that the right for peaceful demonstration is an absolute right of every Egyptian, of every human being. I wish that we didn't have to go to the street to impress on the regime that they need to change. We tried signatures, we tried boycotting the election. Nothing worked. The regime, every demand fell on deaf ear, and the young people took the credit for going to the street and make things happen.
The protests continue to create a dilemma for Hosni Mubarak's National Democratic Party. Similar mass protests in neighbouring Tunisia a few weeks ago ended more than 2 decades of autocratic rule there, and the inspiration provided by those demonstrations is making similar regimes in the region nervous. For the first time since these demonstrations began, someone from Egypt's ruling NDP has fronted the media. While he condemned the protests, he also signalled a possible softening.
I say yes to dialogue, yes to power sharing, and yes to the sharing and exchange of opinions, but in a peaceful and legal manner.
You too, Mr. President. It's great to be here.
It's an approach which will please Egypt's nervous Western allies. The US President Barack Obama offered qualified support for the Egyptian president while urging restraint on all sides.
My main hope right now is that violence is not the answer in solving these problems in Egypt. So the government has to be careful about not resorting to violence, and the people on the streets have to be careful about not resorting to violence.
It's the first morning of the weekend in Egypt, and the traditional rallying point of Friday prayers will begin here shortly. What happens immediately after the mosques empty will be the country's next big test. Ben Knight, ABC News, Cairo.